Welcome patrons. After I finished the video for Dragon Age Legends, I needed another pandemic project. I wasn't sure what to do when I got a DM from Dan, more on him later, telling me about a Dragon Age theme park ride. I've been into Dragon Age since 2015, and the fact that I hadn't actually heard of it until Dan sent me a link should be pretty telling about how widespread this is. The hunt for this ride became a bit of a wild story, and I think is important to tell, but if you do want to skip to the actual information on just the ride, here is the time code for that. Anyway, everybody, it is my honor to tell you all about Dragon Age: Flight of the Wardens. History of the ride. So a lot of what I'm about to say is actually cobbled together with news and tweets I could find, but I'm filling in the blanks with some logical conclusions. So this isn't 100% accurate, but it is how I understand the story of the ride so far. Sometime around 2015, a company in Dubai wanted to make an indoor theme park around gaming for you gamer boys out there. This place would be called the Hub Zero. They would be able to partner with a few gaming companies, including EA, to use some of the licenses in creating themed rides. Other partner IPs include Resident Evil, Final Fantasy, Plants vs. Zombies, and what you are here for, Dragon Age. Now, for the most part, the IPs that were picked are fairly popular and household names, and look, we all love DA here, but it really isn't fitting in with that very much. But remember, at this time, Dragon Age Inquisition had just come out and was doing really well. Or it was about to come out. I'm not actually quite sure on the timeline here. Either way, there is a reason that the game is filled with Inquisition assets and theming. We know the company did meet with BioWare, specifically Mike Laidlaw, thanks to a tweet he did over what the world was, so keep this in mind for later. The ride would open up in August 2016, and a few journalists and travel bloggers picked up on the theme park, but for the most part it was really a regional thing. And Russian, I don't really know why, but there were a lot of Russians that went there. Anyway, between August 2016 and February 2020, the Dragon Age ride would fall a bit short compared to the others. Namely, that it was kind of a bit of an outlier. Most of the other rides were more of an experience where you got to run around and shoot things or drive things and in general get to actually move around, while the Dragon Age ride was sitting in a chair that flipped you around as you watched a movie, which to those of you thinking this sounds a lot like the Harry Potter castle ride, it's actually made by the same company, so it's pretty much exactly like that. But we'll put a pin on that thought and move on with the history of the ride. While the Dragon Age ride did have its fans, and it actually wasn't bad by any means, something to keep in mind is the demographics of Hub Zero. See, while they did market to all ages, the places became super popular with kids and birthday parties. So the kid-appropriate Plants vs. Zombies and the super edgy Resident Evil ride became some of the most documented attractions in the area. But the most documented and popular area by far was the Hero Zone. But before I talk about that, let's discuss the layout of the place. See, the place was kind of designed like a giant loop. While you could travel in any direction, a majority of people bought their tickets and went right, because that's just how people work. It's psychology. And one of the very last rides on this loop, the Dragon Age ride. And the attraction right before it, the Hero Zone. The Hero Zone was a neat little place where you got hooked up to a harness and was able to jump around and climb tall things and do all sorts of whatever, which, as anyone can see, would be the highlight of any child. Actually, I'd be pretty thrilled to do that as well, to be honest. And the lines were always pretty long, and as you can imagine, this is also pretty physically taxing, even for a kid. So, what I want you all to do now is put yourself in the mind of the average customer here, a parent of some kids. You just spent a few hours running around and having some fun with the kiddo. It's been a really long day, and you do the big attraction after waiting in line for way too long, and now you're tired, they are tired, and you're also right next to the cafe and you're hungry, so let's just eat and go home. And the last few rides don't really have great reviews anyway, and they're from things the kids haven't actually heard of, so whatever, man. Now, don't get me wrong, people obviously did ride it, but a few sources I found say it didn't normally have that long of lines. Less people means less content being produced in the area, and for now, another pin in that conversation. Finally, we get to February 2020, when it was announced that Hub Zero closed its doors for good and was trying to sell parts of the ride. While the brand would reopen in another location in late 2020, it would be more like an arcade with none of the rides, and namely, the Dragon Age ride inside. Now, some of you are ready to claim this as another victim of COVID closures, but from what I could tell, lockdowns for the area didn't actually hit until March, so this is actually likely due to money issues, as the place did have a reputation for being expensive. And as of now, I'm not sure where the ride is. If it did get sold to another buyer, they likely have replaced the in-ride movie with another one, as the company that made the ride does sell more generic movies to use. But there are a lot of props made for the area whose fates are unknown as well. It's entirely possible that somewhere in Dubai is a mini golf or a restaurant that has a Ferelden banner or a repainted dragon just chilling about. Google, vlogs, and the DA archivists. So as you might have seen in my screenshot from Dan, I was notified about the ride in late October, well after it closed. As you might have noticed from some of my videos and the fact that I played a grueling 100+ hour game to find the ending, I hate not knowing Dragon Age things. So the fact that there wasn't immediately a video I could watch or a write-up I could read of what the ride was had me incredibly frustrated. Initially, after a very thorough page 20 whatever Google search in the matter, this is all that I found, which we will come back to all this again later, so don't worry. A Fextra Life thread in which Hunger helpfully screen capped a now defunct website for the park, which shows pictures of the outside of the ride, its logo, and a small snippet of its plot. The Mike Layla tweet about meeting with ride developers. A blog from a man living in Dubai that might have the best pictures of the place. A small page in the SimWorks website that has cool behind-the-scenes photos. SimWorks is the company that made the actual ride itself, along with a lot of rides with the same mechanic. Remember this website. Another website for a man named Vikram Verma, who was on some part of the ride production, and while his website lists him as an executive producer, I'm not sure if that was his role in the Dragon Age ride. Either way, it's in his portfolio. And finally, Mba Studios, a German company that did some background modeling and lighting for the in-ride movie, and had posted snippets of the final in-ride video on their website. His website also listed that he was hired by Riva Digital, who made the rest of it. From what I could find, Riva Digital is a now dissolved Indian CGI company who apparently had a reputation for not paying its hired artists on time, so oh no! Okay, so not much to go on, and frankly this left me with more questions than answers. The next idea was to use my audience for help, because while YouTube says I have no viewers at all in Dubai, at least some of them might have some sort of connection there, or have written it, right? Well, no, despite me giving a shout out in a video, and the podcast, and the weird channel page thing on YouTube that I never really use, and on Twitter, the only person to actually contact me saying they had ridden the ride was only thanks to Mark Dara retweeting my efforts on Twitter. The user, who I have actually not been able to get into contact with them since, so I will not name them, told me a bit about the ride and sent along an old Snapchat she had taken with a friend of hers. This video would also go on to be the best audio source we have of the movie that played before the ride, and again, more on this later. Speaking of trying to find someone who had ridden the ride, I had also gone to R Dubai on Reddit. I know some would suggest going to our Dragon Age, but looking through the posts about the ride whenever it was mentioned, no one had ridden it. So I figured anyone there had not actually been, and a better chance would be people who aren't fans of the series but have just happened to go to Hub Zero. I didn't have a lot of comments, but one very nice person responded with everything they knew. While I didn't help with trying to piece together the story of the ride, they were the only source I had seen that noted the ride had some other special effects. While all this was going on, I had also been searching YouTube for vlogs or videos that people had shot of the area. This led me to probably the most disturbing aspect of this whole search. Kids on the internet. Now, I say disturbing because while there were a few channels from just like twerpy kids who wanted to be the next Jake Paul or whatever, there were an equal amount of channels that star kids but obviously produced by some over-controlling parent. It was a very surreal experience watching these little Dubai children saying canned lines and obviously pretending to have fun for a good shot while rocking my own infant daughter to sleep at 3 a.m. Things didn't get better at all when I tried Instagram and started to get very obviously underage girls in poses aimed to show off adult assets, and I just can't believe I still saw that. And honestly, I almost got nothing for my troubles, but a reminder that there are some trash parents out there. Oh my god. Anyway, because of the reasons I said above, the Dragon Age ride was one of the least documented. Most of these channels would just pose with this like well that was randomly in the waiting line and then be off or cut and that'd be it. However, there were 2 vlogs that stood out. One was of a young girl who was just hanging out with her friend and decided to try her best to document every single ride in the place by sneaking in her camera. She gave a valiant effort and got almost all of the rides, but sadly was caught by the ride operator when trying to get on the Dragon Age ride. Now, in part because she didn't actually catch anything we don't have elsewhere, but mostly because she is very underage, I won't link to her content. But I just wanted to give positive thoughts to this young lady for doing her best junior archival work. The second was from a man who seems to be in his 20s, thank God, who took a selfie stick to the park. This is actually one of the better footage we have of the line of the ride because of the mostly still camera. But what is most notable is that in the room before you get on the ride, he is still able to record and manages to capture a lot of the images of the before movie. Now, the sad part of this is that the dude bro decided the best audio for this occasion was a cover of the song Happy by Pharrell. But he didn't mute the original audio either. While for most of the song, it's too loud and you can't make out what's being said, there is just a small snippet where you can understand a bit. And you can actually fit in the Snapchat clip from earlier to get a better grasp of what is going on. Which, side note, I did leave a comment asking if he would be able to upload the clip without the song, but he has not been active in pretty much since posting that. So as of now, there has been no response. And with that, that is everything I could find on the Dragon Age ride that existed on the internet. If something else exists out there, it either isn't tagged, hasn't been uploaded at the time of writing this, or on a place of the internet that doesn't speak English. But I still had a lot of questions, so it was time to bite the bullet, put on my big girl britches, and actually contact people. This was something that, I personally had feared because let's take a look at the bigger picture, guys. This whole channel thing is kind of weird, right? I get messages from some of you that sound like you kind of look up to me, like I'm a huge figurehead in this community. But the reality of my situation is that I'm an ex-therapist who now stays at home in her jammies all day with a baby and likes this one video game a lot to put a weird amount of work into it. And that's really it. This is something I largely hid from most people in my life, and breaking out of pure fandom land into the reality of emailing real businesses about something that they had worked on 5 to 6 years ago is weird, you know? Even more so that I was going to be doing such with an email handle of just gibberish like Gilder Thalin. Most people in the fandom don't even know what that means. So, in an effort to fake it till you make it, I knew coming as one fan with an easily Googleable email address attached to a YouTube might not make it very far, so I started off most of my emails explaining that I was part of a larger group of fans who were looking for lost media in the Dragon Age series, the DA Archivists. I even had a Google phone number, as some companies required a contact number to send an email, and I was honestly so close to actually calling up Dubai at one point, but that's another story. So now I had a group that apparently cared about the information I was looking for, and that somehow, at least to me, seemed more noble. And I mean, the series sold a bunch of copies, so it had to be a bunch of people, right? In truth, I'm not actually sure how much this worked, but it made me feel better, but it is what I did. Now, the exact order of who I contacted isn't going to be exact here because some people could only be contacted via their website, so I have no personal record of my message, which was my mistake. I just didn't think about it. Anyway, but at this point, everyone I contacted has at least had a month or more to respond. Mba Studios was the first person I emailed, as it was obvious they had some of the goods. No response to my email. The person who runs the business does link his Twitter on his website, so after months of no response, I did tweet at him. He did respond that he wasn't sure that he could release more or if he had even anything to release, but would contact me if he could, and I have not been contacted since. I tweeted at Mike Laidlaw about the meeting, but he has since left BioWare, but he noted that he couldn't remember all that much, other than he doesn't think the company really honored the world that much, which, definitely true. I emailed Mr. Verma and got no response at all. The Hub Zero no longer had an active email at the time, so I had emailed the owners of the building looking for a forwarding email. I got an automated response from them saying I should email other businesses in their strip if I wanted a direct response, but someone would look into my message. After that, I got no response. When the Hub Zero reopened at the current location, I also sent them an email and Instagram message, and I got no response in either. At this point, I was running out of ideas. The only two companies I had not contacted and were still operational were the ones who made the mechanical parts of the ride and BioWare, but it was clear to me that they only told them of Thetis and had no other involvement. But after months of waiting, posting, retweeting, and more, with almost nothing to show for it, I couldn't just turn down a lead at this point. So I sent an email to SimWorks and then BioWare community leader Jay a while later. Jay was incredibly quick in his response, despite me DMing him really late at night, and was incredibly kind to offer help in my doomed search. He had this whole plan that he was going to talk about, and I was just so hopeful about it, and it was really, really nice. And then, now as I mentioned earlier, I have an infant daughter. She's about 8 months now, but because she's still a bit tiny, she wakes up hungry, and so we feed her about 5 a.m. It's our ritual. So it was during this routine, literally hours after I DM'd Jay, that I checked my phone to see that SimWorks had responded. Hi, Katie. Thanks for your message to our website. I have actually noticed a few posts on Reddit, etc. the past few weeks looking for this when I've been analyzing our website. I've had a look through our old server archives, but I don't know if we really had a copy of the original footage itself from what I found. It may be somewhere on a hard drive in our office, but as we are working remotely currently, this isn't something I can access at this time. However, I was passed on a couple of videos last year when I myself was looking for better footage of the ride, and it shows most of the movie in the background. Unfortunately, it's not the best, but I shall send you a link to them uploaded on our Vimeo for you to do with what you wish. Hope this was some sort of help. Kind regards, Nicole. I debated for an hour or so if I should wait to post this in a video or on Twitter, finally deciding that I couldn't wait, so I DM'd poor Jay about it at 6 in the morning, partly because I felt so bad that I had bothered him, and I wrote this giant message to him, and then immediately had my problem solved, despite spending months on this, and then just tweeted it out to the world, Jay, I'm so sorry, I felt so bad, and I'm kind of embarrassed about it. It's really dumb, I'm so sorry. But yeah, thanks to Nicole, who apparently also had been wondering about this ride and who had noticed an uptick in website traffic to actually Google it and then find my messages, although I don't know if she connected it to the person who emailed her or not. But the major part of the mystery had been solved. But I actually really want to highlight that to you guys. I didn't actually visit the website that much, but I did have it linked to me a bunch when I was looking for information. In a weird way, all of you are actually more responsible for this coming to light than I am. If it wasn't for everyone who had tried to help me in my search or in their own curiosity, Nicole and SimWorks likely wouldn't have noticed the uptick in their website or even cared. Somehow, the Dragon Age archivist had actually been real the whole time, and it was all of you who had cared enough to look and help archive this piece of media. Now, before going over the ride itself, I've told this long story because I think it is important in the effort of preserving media. This is my personal record of who has been contacted and what was found. Because after this video, I'm largely giving up on my search. But there are still quite a lot of loose ends here. Better and cleaner versions of the before and in-ride movie could be found. The fate of the ride parts could be located. It might even be possible that its entire ride itself might pop up in another place. This is just where I have looked and where I don't think has any more information to give, either because they don't have any or they legally aren't allowed. So if you want to take up the mantle of looking for the Dragon Age ride again, power to you, and please take this notes and just run with it. Dragon Age Flight of the Wardens. Okay, finally, what most of you have been waiting for, what was this ride? To quickly summarize what I ended up finding, what I'm about to say is based on a ton of footage from photographs on the outside of the ride and in the line area, a few snippets of promotional text, 2 incomplete videos of the before ride movie, 3 portfolio pieces, and 2 test videos that show the whole in-ride movie, although not the final render. So the most prominent thing about the ride was a giant dragon with glowing eyes on top of it, which was based on the Ferelden Frostback model from Inquisition. The best look on the outside of the building, so to speak, comes from a YouTube channel called #GNTech, who took a 360-degree selfie stick tour of the entire area. I've linked the video down below, but the ride comes up at around 9:30 mark. There really isn't much to speak about the outside other than it looks like a castle wall. There you go. The line area itself was also kind of cool, with some in-game items brought to life, like various banners and shields. Although the weirdest thing was this well, where I just have no idea why it was there. I saw a ton of videos of kids like looking down for like something cool that was in the well, and then they just kind of shrugged like, oh, it was an empty well. I don't know what I expected. So it really was just there for no reason, and me and apparently everyone else that passed by this well want to know why there's a well there. I got nothing. Anyway, after a bit of a zigzag, we brought into small groups of 4 into a room where a movie played. From what I've been able to piece together, this movie would give a small introduction of the world of Thetis, with images of demons and darkspawn panning about, and then of the Breach and Skyhold from Dragon Age Inquisition trailers. It then cuts to new footage of 2 characters that'll be with us for our journey, Eldron and Alexia. From the audio of the 2 videos we do have, none of this world building bit has been saved, but some of the dialogue between our 2 characters has.
Do not worry, I have prepared a magical flying harness for you.
I, however, have my own means of transport.
Steady your courage and join us on the battlements.
Now the hook for this whole thing is that you're about to ride on a dragon. So we know for certain that Eldron says that he made a flying harness for you to ride on the dragon, which I think is absolutely hilarious. And you're about to save Thetis, while Alexia touts that she has her own means of transportation and then turns into a dragon. Eldron then pops in again to say that the riders should ready themselves, and then to meet him on the battlements, to which the movie ends, and I assume it's time to board the ride. The full link to the test footage is below, so please click on it to watch it in full without commentary, but probably the easiest way to explain what is happening is just to, show it. So you head out to the battlements of what I'm assuming is a Warden thing, based on the outfits, despite having circle tower banners? I don't know.
There you are. Hurry now. Follow us.
Eldron and Dragon Alexia then hop into the air, and you go towards the rift.
The rift is this way, but beware the darkspawn archers.
Eldron then mentions to beware the darkspawn archers, and then I'm not actually sure what's going on. You can see Dragon Alexia blow fire, so perhaps she took care of the archers. I honestly can't see what they're firing at, if anything at all. This is probably where I should note that the ride did have heating and minor water elements, so a blast of heat would have likely hit the riders when she did that.
Quickly, into the clouds. Look out! A flying patrol! They've seen us!
A flying patrol of things. Again, get to it.
He was close. There are too many of them! Try to lose them in the valley! Careful! Fly low! Get back! It's the Pride Demon!
And then it's the Pride Demon boss battle.
Start the attack! Watch out for its magic! Pull up! You're going to crash! Blow the demon there! Try to make his fireballs destroy the rift!
Now, I know we want to make fun of fireballs closing a rift, but look, in Awakening, we close them with swords, so we have no room to talk, guys.
Look out! Witch! Help them! It is chasing you! Go left! The rift is collapsing! It's pulling us in! You must fight backward! One last push! We made it! Well done! You tricked the demon into destroying the rift. and sent it back to its foul world.
It is time for you to return home as hero.
And here, while I do want to note that this is early footage of the in-ride movie, and even in the second video you can see changes, I just want to point out the animation of Alexia turning back into a dragon. Oh, it's so good. It's so bad good. I love it so much. Also, note the size of her as a dragon to Eldron. She turned into a horse-sized dragon, and again, it's amazing. Anyway, time to ride home, and
We've helped the demon to control them. The Darkspawn are in full retreat.
oh, wait, the demon was controlling the Darkspawn? Wait, what?
You have saved the kingdom. The people are forever in your debt.
Farewell, brave warriors.
Until we meet again.
But yeah, then the ride is over, and that's the end. Discussion. Okay, so a lot to discuss here. Let's start off with the question I've gotten most often. Is this canon? No, God, come on. It's a theme park ride. Why would they make that canon? This isn't Kingdom Hearts. Come on, man. I think we can look at the Layla tweet and say that's the definitive answer here. As you may have noticed, the ride takes a lot of creative liberties and makes a few confusing choices. Now, the first one that I'm not 100% sure on, but I believe the writers of the ride confused the archdemon with just any demon. And for that, I want to point to good old Vikram Verna's website, which lists the plot of the ride as guests must fight murderous demonic hordes of darkspawns as part of the Flying Chase adventure and face our greatest threat, the archdemon. His little synopsis suddenly makes the ride make a lot more sense to me. Maybe it was a translation issue, or maybe they just misunderstood, or maybe they just didn't care. But from a fan perspective, I can understand the confusion between archdemon and demons from people who aren't into fantasy. This is something my mom would create after 30 minutes of a rundown of the world of Dragon Age. Something I've also glossed over is the faraway Nothin. As you could tell from the clips I have, Nothin was never mentioned. It seems that this name only lived on the Hub Zero website. I've seen it copied and pasted a few other places as well. Unless a full audio of the pre-ride movie comes out and mentioned it, at this point I have no idea what this is supposed to be. My best guess is that this is the name of the base you start at. Now, in lore, because you don't travel that far from the base and the threat is saving the kingdom of Ferelden, then this Nothin is likely within or very close to Ferelden. The problem is that the only unknown and considered far-off place is at least close to Ferelden is to the south, which is considered an icy wasteland. As there is no ice, I don't think it's there. Another possibility is that this takes place on a small island close to the Ferelden coast. I personally find this to be the best possibility, although it doesn't really fit in with the far off bit because those are, for the most part, pretty populated areas. Although at this point, I'm thinking I'm putting more thought into this than the writers of the ride, so your mileage may vary. Next, let's talk Eldron and Alexia. Aside from just being Anders from Awakening and Yavanna from Silent Grove, they do have some interesting implications. Eldron wears something a lot like Anders does in Dragon Age 2. This is never confirmed to be Warden wear, and I personally believe it's not supposed to be either, but I think that they chose his armor based on wanting to use a Warden mage, which Eldron is. Now, the bubble thing he does is interesting too. Flying like he does is described to take a lot of energy, and that the most common way to get this effect is to use a force spell to push up against the ground. While that does levitate something, this doesn't actually cause propulsion. So the actual flying bit was done by griffins or hallas in some media, or aimed force spells in others. Think one of those water jetpack things, but with magic. And then the actual bubble, a shield to protect himself, actually isn't unusual. But all of this together, and then the way he flies around, makes this an incredible feat, and quite frankly broken in the lore in my opinion. So while this is possible, your average Grey Warden wouldn't be able to do this. This is player character levels of brokenness ability here. Alexia existing as a potential witch of the wilds that can turn into a dragon makes sense, actually. However, the tiny dragon aspect is incredibly amusing to me. There are an unknown number of witches in Thedas, so she actually makes more plausible sense than Eldron here. Now, because we are assuming that this takes place in or around Ferelden, it could also be worked that the rumors of witches in the wilds could have been either Morrigan or Alexia. I'm actually surprised she works as well as she does, and I'm kind of all for more witches in the lore, honestly. I don't know, I don't know, guys. I kind of just like the tiny dragon. It's just so stupid. It's getting cute. The weird flying demons, I'm unsure about. They really do just look like terror demons with wings, but it's hard to get a good look at them. The best I can say is that this is unique to the ride, or at the very least, a reworked terror demon model. Now, while we know this isn't canon, part of me loves to take the licensed media and try to force it into one coherent narrative for Thedas. For example, I have chosen to believe that the awful IDW comics is one of those super fake stories that gets passed down from age group to age group. A warning story for having sex, getting pregnant, and then escaping because your kid will still be trapped in the circle forever. So while we can all choose to believe what we want here, and please tell me what you think this ride's about in the world of Thedas, I would like to submit my personal fan theory on how the plot of this ride actually happened in Thedas. During the Blight, a ton of Fereldans tried to escape the threat of Darkspawn. However, remember that the first sign of Blight came from the southern end of Thedas, and those wishing to escape would have mainly gone north, because it had been so long since the last Darkspawn had been seen, and those who originally fled their lands would have caused others who had not seen the Blight to run as well. This would cause a good amount of people who had never seen the Darkspawn to still run, and many did so by boat, as there is a belief that Darkspawn can't cross water very well. In comes Nothin, which I am dubbing somewhere in here. While still in the Ferelden territory, it's a decent-sized island, and across a body of water to relative safety. The Circle Tower of Ferelden also had its share of troubles, and a fair amount of people did escape. And where else would be a good place to go than north, again, away from the Blight. So now we have a decent amount of mages leading to Nothin. While they weren't accepted at first, they were crucial in helping set up settlements, so tensions started to ease. Right after the 5th Blight, support for Grey Wardens were at an all-time high. Nothin, being made up almost entirely by refugees at this point, decided they wanted to bring Wardens to their island for safety. But, look, who knows how to get hold of the Wardens? Not them. And what do they got that normal people don't? Besides a lot, but it's not like the common folk know this. So step in Eldrin. Young Eldrin escaped from the Ferelden Circle Tower, and while he doesn't know much about the Wardens, he knows enough that recruited mages won't be hunted by the Templars anymore. So he took it upon himself to create the Nothin Wardens, acting as Warden Commander. Him and his fellow mage buddies, along with a few volunteers, created the Cell of Wardens and began protecting the city. No one really knows anything about the Blight or Darkspawn here, but they got a lot of heart. Now, real quick, I want to jump over to Dragon Age Legends lore, and I'm just as surprised that I'm doing that as you. And remind you that in the same area, Jainan, another settlement with its own circle tower, was destroyed by a dragon cult a couple years after the Blight or so. But more so that the strange dragon worshippers drew the attention of one Witch of the Wilds, Alexia. While powerful, she could only take the form of an immature baby tiny dragon, and she quietly watched as the group of heroes from Dragon Age Legends destroyed the cultists, and after they leave, she begins to pick through the ruins. Eldron and his wardens, who at this point got word that something was wrong with their sister's town, went to find out what had happened, and this is how the two met. Alexia likely knew that Eldron and his buddies could never be real wardens, but liked the tenacity enough to stay around and see what the heck was going to happen. Like, what's going on? I don't know, Alexia wanted to know. And years later, the breach happens. People think it's the end of the world, and a rift opens containing a large pride demon who is able to control other demons to attack the city of Nothin. Remember, this warden cell is largely loosely trained farmers and some escaped circle mages that need to convince the town that they are enough of a warden group to not need Templar interference. It's been 10 years since the Blight ended, and I'm sure people are getting a little bit tired of this warden cell just play pretending and not really defending them for much. Look, they even built this terrible tiny fortress near town square, so hey, did you guys know that the Pride Demon is actually an archdemon? Oh, you thought it would be a dragon? I mean, look at the rift in the sky. Could a normal demon do that? No? Yeah, didn't think so. So this is a special archdemon. Anyway, Eldron and his men and the people in the ride, I guess, attack the rift and are able to trick the demon back into the Fade, and then the rift closes with whatever is the same reason that the rift closes in the Dragon Age Origins DLCs. Maybe it's not actually closed, it's just dormant, I don't know, the end. So, yeah, in short, my story is about Eldron trying to escape the Templar so hard he pulls a bit of a black wall and then creates a cult of fake wardens and pretends the Sixth Blight just happened. Meanwhile, Alexia is just fascinated by the tenacity of this guy and maybe falls for him a bit because this is a Dragon Age. So I stayed around a while before moving on to our next strange magical adventure. Anyway, that's my fan fiction on a theme park ride. Thank you for listening. And that, dear patrons, is all that I have on the Dragon Age theme park ride, Flight of the Wardens. Now, you may remember at the start of this video, I mentioned that I would get back to Dan. Well, Dan here is part of a team that helped preserve the last court, which was sadly taken down in November 2020. The whole team behind this effort, while pleased they were able to catch so much, are still missing a bit. But beyond that, what they have preserved is screenshots of the story. Now, if you have played the game, you know that this would be incredibly chaotic to read. So while a record still exists, the goal for this team would be a playable version, or at the very least an easier to read format like a script or something. So the team has cooked up the idea to show that there's some interest in this. So what I'm asking you guys is please help us by posting your theories, favorite memories, personal headcanons from the last court, or maybe even how bummed you are that you didn't get to play it, with the hashtag #SaveSeralt on March 12th on your social media of choice. We were choosing Twitter, but Instagram, Facebook, whatever you want. Our goal is to drum up a lot of attention about this little tiny game and show that people still care. And with that, do you still have lingering questions, proof that I'm wrong, comments about your own fan theory? Feel free to tweet me at @Echorathon on Twitter or send a PM to user Gillanon on Reddit. Duress Sheral.